A solitary figure stands atop a windswept hill, tracing glowing symbols into the twilight. This is Gandalf the Grey, and he is listening for a secret the world has almost forgotten. He seeks a lost melody woven from pure starlight, a song of creation itself. By the end of this journey, you will discover how a single, forgotten note can restore harmony to an entire world. But in the deepening shadows, other, hungrier things are listening too, drawn by the same promise of power. What ancient magic sleeps in the quiet spaces of the earth, waiting only for someone to remember its tune? I would love to know where you are listening from right now, and what the local time is for you as we begin this story together. What is the one memory you would preserve if you had the power to save it forever? The wind's whisper was not a sound, but a pattern, a pressure against his mind that slowly resolved into a map. The lost melody was not scattered, but sleeping, gathered in a place known as the Silent Woods. Without a moment's hesitation, Gandalf turned from the hill and began his journey. His gray cloak billowed like a storm cloud as he walked, staff in hand, a point of moving light in the vast, moon-drenched landscape. He did not rest, for the call was urgent, a thread of magic he dared not let go cold. And soon, he realized he was not entirely alone. A small, russet fox had fallen into step far behind him, its silent paws keeping perfect time with his own. Its bright eyes were twin moons, reflecting the soft glow of his staff, a quiet witness to his pilgrimage. The path through the rolling hills was deceptively beautiful, bathed in silver and shadow. Yet with every step, the peace began to feel thin, like a veneer over something hollow. The normal night sounds, the chirping of insects and the distant call of an owl, did not just fade away. They were absent, as if they had never been. This was not a natural quiet, the gentle pause between breaths. This was a silence that pressed against the ears, a void that felt deliberate, as if the very air had been commanded to be still. It was a silence that listened back. A lesser traveler might have turned, heeding the primal instinct that screams at the absence of life's constant hum. But Gandalf was a student of deeper laws. He felt the wrongness, the oppressive weight, and he chose to walk into its very heart. He trusted the light within him, the same light that had answered the wind's call, to be his compass where his senses failed. The stakes of his quest were now terrifyingly clear. This was not merely a search for a forgotten song. It was a confrontation with a force that devoured sound, that made a feast of silence. To find a melody here was to reclaim life from a consuming emptiness. As the first gnarled and twisting trees of the Silent Woods rose before him, their branches like skeletal fingers against the sky, the fox at his heels came to an abrupt halt. It did not snarl or flee. It simply stopped, looked once more at the wizard with its luminous eyes, and then melted away into the gloom from which it came. The message was unmistakable. This was a threshold. Taking a final, steadying breath that made no sound, Gandalf the Grey stepped forward, crossing from the world of quiet into the domain of absolute silence, utterly alone. The moment he crossed beneath the first arch of gnarled branches, the last of the world's sound vanished. It was not a fading, but a severance, as if a great door had shut behind him. Curious, Gandalf lifted his staff and brought it down upon a thick, exposed root. He felt the impact travel up his arms, a solid jolt, but the resulting thump was swallowed whole by the oppressive stillness. No echo followed, no rustle of disturbed leaves. The silence was not empty. It was a presence, thick and heavy, that drank all noise without satisfaction. This absolute loss of sound was profoundly disorienting, forcing his mind to stretch its other senses to compensate. His sight sharpened, noting the intricate, silvery veins on leaves that were not brittle or brown, but held in a perfect emerald stasis. The trees were not dead. They were slumbering, caught in an enchanted pause that felt less like peace and more like a held breath. And from within that collective suspension, he felt a slow, patient attention turning toward him. He was a foreign object in a still pond, and the pond was aware. To navigate, he could not rely on the world around him. He had to create his own guide. Closing his eyes to the unsettling watchfulness of the woods, Gandalf drew a slow breath and began to hum. It was not a spell, nor an attempt to shatter the quiet. It was a low, simple tune from the deep wells of his memory, a foundational melody from the world's youth. He focused not on the sound, which the silence devoured the moment it left his lips, but on the vibration it created within his own chest. This internal resonance became his compass, a subtle thrumming that felt stronger when he turned toward the heart of the woods, toward the source of the purer, lost song he sought. His humming sent the faintest possible ripple through the magical stillness. It was a disturbance no larger than a single dropped pebble, but in a pond this still, even a pebble's fall is a cataclysm. And from the profound depths of the woods, from beneath layers of roots and time, something dormant acknowledged the vibration. Something began to stir, its attention shifting from a passive watchfulness to a slow, deliberate focus. Unaware of the specific awakening he had triggered, but feeling the increasing weight of the air, Gandalf pressed onward, following the internal map of his own hum into a part of the forest where the trees grew unnaturally thick and the warm night air turned cold. The path opened into a small clearing, and there it stood, a tree of impossible age. Its trunk, wider than a house, was wrapped in thick, silver vines that pulsed with a soft, sleeping light. This was no mere plant. It was a sentinel, a living ward placed here to guard something precious. Gandalf approached slowly, the profound silence making his movements feel like a prayer. He did not speak, for words had no power here. Instead, he reached out and gently laid his palm upon the rough, cool bark. A deep, resonant thrum traveled up his arm, a heartbeat so slow and vast it felt like the pulse of the earth itself. To his astonishment, his own heart fell into rhythm with the ancient beat, a sudden, profound connection that transcended the void of sound. In that moment of synchronicity, a vision blossomed behind his eyes. He saw not with light, but with pure understanding. High above, on a specific branch that curved like a beckoning finger, hung a single, crystallized dewdrop. It was perfectly clear, yet within it swirled the essence of 1,000 half-remembered tunes, the distilled potential of the very melody he sought. This was the treasure the Sentinel protected. A terrible choice now lay before him. To command the tree, to force it to yield its charge, would be a violence, a trespass against a guardian as old as the hills. Yet to take the dewdrop by stealth felt equally wrong, a betrayal of the trust inherent in that shared heartbeat. So the wizard made his decision. He did not reach for a branch. He did not chant a spell of command. He simply sat, his back against the great roots, and closed his eyes. He opened his mind, not with words, but with pure intent, sharing his purpose. He showed the sentinels dreaming consciousness images of a world growing quieter, grayer, losing its color and joy as this fundamental song was forgotten. He projected not a desire to possess the melody, but a need to preserve it, to let it sing again for all the world to hear. The slow, ancient mind of the tree considered him. It felt the truth in his offering, the absence of greed. In response, the silver vines that had been so tightly woven around the trunk began to loosen. They uncoiled with a soft, rustling silence, slowly pulling back like sleepy serpents, clearing a path upward. But this delicate exchange of intent was a flare in the magical stillness. The other presence in the woods, the thing that had been stirring, was now fully roused. Its attention was a cold spotlight, and it was moving. As the last vine retracted, a patch of deeper shadow detached itself from the base of a nearby tree. It did not walk so much as it poured forward, a liquid darkness that slid over the silent earth, inching its way toward the clearing. The liquid shadow poured into the clearing, a formless stain that drank the light from the air itself. The warm glow from Gandalf's staff faltered and dimmed as the creature slid forward, its sole purpose to envelop the ancient sentinel and swallow the crystallized song whole. In an instant, Gandalf was on his feet, a gray barrier between the advancing darkness and the slumbering tree. He thrust his staff forward, and it erupted in a blaze of fierce, white light, pushing against the encroaching void. The light was a shield, a brilliant wall of defiance, but it was also a paradox. This creature did not simply dwell in silence, it consumed it, and the vibrant energy of his magic was a potential feast, a grander sound for it to devour. A direct confrontation would be a battle of attrition he could not win, each burst of power only making the enemy stronger. Understanding flashed in the wizard's eyes, a terrifying and brilliant deduction. He could not fight the silence with noise, so, in a move that defied every instinct, he made the silence his own. He let the blazing light of his staff die. The clearing plunged back into gloom, the absence of his light somehow deeper and more profound than before. He closed his eyes, dismissing the urge to summon another spell, and instead turned his focus inward. He gathered all his will, all his hope, and concentrated it not on a shout, but on a single, pure note of peace that resonated only within the quiet depths of his own spirit. It was an offering, not a challenge. The advancing shadow, which had been coiling to strike at the vanished light, suddenly hesitated. Its form, a shifting blot of nothingness, flickered with palpable confusion. It was a predator designed to feed on conflict and energy, and this sudden surrender, this offering of serene intent, was something it had no capacity to process. It recoiled, not from force, but from a concept it could not consume. In that precious moment of uncertainty, the ancient tree, which had been a silent witness to this exchange of will, finally stirred. Its countless leaves, held in enchanted stasis for ages, rustled in a great, soundless exhalation. The entire forest seemed to lean in, its collective attention fully and finally awakened to the guardian's sacrifice. A branch of the ancient tree, gnarled and heavy with time, slowly unfurled toward Gandalf. It moved with a deliberate, silent grace, its tip hovering just above his open palm. The crystallized dewdrop trembled, then detached, falling not like a drop of water, but like a slow, deliberate star. It landed in his hand with a weightless coolness, and the moment it touched his skin, the world inside his mind erupted into music. It was not a sound he heard with his ears, but a pattern of pure understanding that flowed directly into his spirit. This was the lost melody, the harmony of creation itself, a vast and intricate song of beginnings and endings, of growth and stillness. It was knowledge and peace intertwined, a truth so fundamental it quieted every fear and filled the hollow the wood's silence had carved within him. Yet the shadow creature did not vanish. Repelled by the purity of the unmanifested song, it recoiled but held its ground, its form coiling into a denser, darker knot of waiting malice. It was a patient hunter, sensing that to carry such a treasure was to become a target. Understanding this, Gandalf made his choice. He did not clutch the melody to his chest as a solitary prize. Instead, he turned back to the Sentinel tree, and with a thought, he offered a single, shining thread of the song back to its guardian. It was a gift of profound gratitude, a recognition that the tree was not just a vault, but a partner in this eternal watch. The ancient being absorbed the thread of melody, and its silver vines ignited with a soft, brilliant light. This new radiance was not an attack, but a reaffirmation of life, pushing against the oppressive silence and forcing the shadow to slither backward, its form fraying at the edges as it retreated deeper into the dark woods. The guardian was fortified, its purpose renewed. With the complete melody now a living part of him, and the clearing secured, Gandalf knew his solitude was over. His task was no longer one of seeking, but of sharing. He had to carry this rediscovered light out of the silent woods and into the waiting, listening world. Gently, he lifted the small leather pouch from around his neck, its soft, worn texture familiar in his hand. He held it open beneath the hovering branch, and the crystallized dewdrop drifted down to settle inside, a star finding its home in a velvet sky. As he drew the cord tight and let the pouch rest once more against his chest, he felt its true weight. It was not the physical weight of the crystal, but the harmonic pressure of the entire melody, a gentle, constant hum of pure potential that now beat in time with his own heart. Turning from the Sentinel, he found the path back was indeed clearer, as if the woods themselves, touched by his peaceful intent, had subtly shifted to ease his departure. The oppressive silence remained, but it was no longer a predator waiting to pounce. It felt more like a held breath, a quiet respect for the treasure he now carried. His greatest challenge, he realized, was only just beginning. To carry such a song into the wider world was to walk with a beacon in the shadows. There were powers that would crave it as a weapon, a means to command and control, and others who would seek to shatter it out of fear of its unifying grace. Its purity made it vulnerable, not to force, but to corruption by lesser intentions. He could not wield it, only share it. His decision was absolute. He would not be a general with this power, but a storyteller. He would offer the melody as a lullaby for the troubled heart, a whisper of hope to a despairing soul, a simple reminder to a weary world of the harmony that slept within its own foundations. This was the quiet burden he accepted, a responsibility that required more grace and patience than any magical duel ever could. The exact moment he crossed the threshold from the silent woods was marked not by a visible border, but by a wave of sound that washed over him with the force of a physical blow. The rustle of a leaf under his boot echoed like a thunderclap. The distant, questioning call of a night bird was a symphony. After the absolute void, the world's noise was a vibrant, chaotic, and utterly beautiful welcome. He stood for a long moment, breathing in the cacophony of life, listening to the world sing its own imperfect, glorious song. The fox was there, sitting patiently on a moonlit rock, its head tilted as if it had been waiting for him all along. The russet fox was waiting for him at the wood's edge, not as a solitary sentinel, but as the center of a small family. 2 tiny kits, their fur still fluffed with youth, peered from behind her legs. Her intelligent eyes met Gandalf's, then drifted to the leather pouch resting against his chest. She gave a slow, deliberate blink, a gesture of profound understanding that needed no sound. Then, without a signal, the small family fell into step behind him. This was no longer the curious trailing of a lone creature. It was an escort, a silent honor guard for the treasure he carried. A powerful urge tightened in Gandalf's chest, a primal instinct to run, to put as much distance as possible between the silent woods and the song's fragile vessel. He could almost feel the weight of unseen attention from the darkened hills, but to hurry would be to treat the melody like a stolen gem, to cloak it in fear and haste. Such a delicate power needed to be settled, not shaken. It required a vessel that was calm and resonant, not one rattled by anxiety. So he made a conscious choice, a quiet act of defiance against the fear of loss. He let his stride find a steady, contemplative rhythm, his staff tapping a gentle, metronomic beat on the hard-packed earth. He would let the journey itself, the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, become a ritual to calm his own spirit and harmonize it with the song within. This patience was immediately tested. As he walked, he began to sense them, not as the hungry void of the shadow creature, but as fleeting impressions in the periphery of his awareness. A shimmer in the corner of his eye that resolved into nothing, a rustle in a distant thicket that fell silent a moment too soon. They were watchers, drawn by the gentle radiance of the melody, their presence a mixture of deep curiosity and a kind of wistful longing. They did not feel hostile, but their intense focus was a constant reminder that he carried a beacon in the twilight, a light that called to every hidden thing. The path curved around a final, rocky outcrop, and the land fell away into a gentle valley. Nestled below, cradled by the protective arms of the hills, were the warm, golden lights of a small village. The site was a quiet promise of hearths and simple comforts, a potential sanctuary where the night's tensions could be soothed. The fox and her kits paused beside him, their gazes also fixed on the distant glow, as if silently approving the destination. The decision felt less like a choice and more like the next natural note in the melody's unfolding song. The golden lights of the village grew brighter as Gandalf descended the gentle slope, his silent vulpine escort melting away into the twilight shadows as if their duty was complete. The air changed, carrying the scent of wood smoke and baking bread, a humble poetry after the scentless void of the woods. He moved through the quiet lanes of Stillwater, his staff's glow a soft beacon that drew curious glances from behind shuttered windows. They did not come out to greet him, these villagers, but he felt their watchful eyes, a community holding its breath. He went directly to the largest dwelling, a low, sturdy house built around the base of an ancient, sheltering oak. knowing instinctively where its wisdom would reside. The door opened before he could knock, and an old woman stood there, her face a map of gentle lines and her eyes holding a deep, untroubled calm. Her name was Alara, and her smile was not one of surprise, but of quiet recognition, as if she had been keeping a place at her fire for him for a very long time. Her welcome was a simple gesture, yet it held the weight of an unspoken pact. The people of Stillwater were generous, she explained as she led him inside, but they lived under a quiet dread. Their gaze was always pulled toward the jagged peaks that framed the northern sky. Strange lights, she murmured, cold and flickering like dying stars, had been seen moving high up in the stone passages where no one dared to travel anymore. They hoped his arrival signaled an end to their unease, that he was a shield come to guard them from whatever stirred in the high, lonely places. Seeing the hope in her weary eyes, Gandalf knew he could offer no simple protection. He would not arm their fears with false promises. Sitting across from her at a rough-hewn table, he loosened the cord of his leather pouch and let the crystallized dewdrop rest in his palm. "This is not a weapon," he said, his voice low and earnest. "It cannot build walls or strike down enemies. It is a memory, a song of how things were meant to be. Its power is not in force, but in remembrance, a single, pure note of peace that the world has forgotten." Alara leaned forward, her eyes reflecting the crystal's soft, internal swirl. She did not reach for it, but simply listened, her head tilted as if hearing a distant tune. She understood. This was a deeper magic than any they had hoped for, and she offered him the safety of her roof without another question. Yet the very purity of what he carried felt suddenly more fragile. Would such a song soothe the disturbance in the mountains, or would its brilliant harmony act as a challenge to the cold lights, provoking a confrontation he was not equipped to fight? As he settled onto a low stool by the crackling hearth, the warmth seeping into his bones, Alara took up a spindle of wool. Her hands moved with an age-old rhythm, and she began to speak, her voice weaving a new kind of spell. She told him the old tales, the ones her own grandmother had told her, of the mountains that did not just stand in silence, but that whispered back. Her grandmother called it the mountain sigh. Alara's voice was soft, her hands never stilling their rhythmic work with the wool. She spoke of a time when the peaks were not jagged and cold, but rounded and gentle, the shoulders of ancient, slumbering giants, made of living stone and soil. The earth itself was their body, and their dreams were the deep, resonant hum that kept the valley fertile and the seasons turning in their proper time. The strange lights the villagers now feared were not invaders, she explained. They were the mountain's troubled dreams, flickering and cold because its rest had become fitful, its vast mind tormented by a discord it could not name. A profound understanding settled in Gandalf's heart, heavier than any stone. The lost melody he carried, the very harmony of creation, was not merely a beautiful artifact to be preserved. It was a medicine. It was the lullaby these slumbering titans had been missing, the pure, foundational note that could soothe the primal dissonance, disturbing their ancient sleep. His quest was no longer about rediscovery, but about healing on a scale he had never contemplated. Yet to interfere with the dreams of beings so vast was a terrifying prospect. Their minds were not like those of men or even elves. They were continents of thought, slow-moving and deep as tectonic plates. To offer his song clumsily, with the force of a command or the uncertainty of a plea, could be like shouting into the ear of a sleeping giant. It might startle them, worsening their unrest and sending tremors through the very foundations of the valley, destroying the village he now sought to protect. The risk was immense, but the duty was clear. He could not stand by, holding the cure while the patient suffered. He would not attempt to command the mountain, for such power was not his to wield. Instead, he would make an offering. At first light, he would climb to a high place, a ledge that looked directly upon the highest peak, and he would simply let the melody flow out from the crystal, a gift of pure harmony sent into the vast, dreaming consciousness. It would be an act of trust, not control. The quiet hope of an entire community now rested on this gentle, perilous gesture. That night, as Gandalf slept on a pallet by the fire, the leather pouch against his chest began to pulse with a soft, steady light. Its gentle rhythm was not random. If one had watched carefully from the window, they would have seen it, a slow, answering beat to the faint, cold flicker of the troubled dreams high on the distant mountain peaks. The first light of dawn was a pale gray promise as Gandalf began his ascent, his boots scuffing against the loose scree of the mountain slope. The fox family moved like rust-colored ghosts beside him, their paws leaving no impression in the dew-silvered grass, silent companions on a journey into the sky. With every step upward, the mountain's discontent grew more palpable. It was not a sound he heard, but a deep, sub-audible rumble of unease that traveled up through the soles of his feet and into his bones, a vibration of profound sorrow that made the very air feel thick and heavy. The path was treacherously steep, littered with shifting stones, but the greater challenge was the emotional weight pressing upon his spirit, a fog of ancient sadness that whispered for him to turn back, to abandon this foolish climb into the heart of a giant's grief. To counter it, he did not grip his staff tighter or summon a spell. Instead, he turned inward, calling up the memory of the lost melody held safe in the crystal against his chest. In his mind, he did not hear it, but felt it, a pattern of perfect harmony that began to resonate within his own being. He let this internal rhythm guide his footsteps, each deliberate placement a quiet counterpoint to the discord vibrating through the stone, a gentle refusal of the despair that sought to claim him. His persistence did not go unnoticed. The mountain itself seemed to become aware of the small, determined point of light climbing its flank. The strange, cold lights he had been told of, which had been distant and sporadic, now began to pulse more rapidly from deep within the fissures and caves above. Their rhythm was agitated, a chaotic flickering that felt like a question. Was it a welcome, a recognition of the harmony he carried, or a final warning to retreat from a place of power that tolerated no intruders? He pressed on, the internal song his only shield, until the path opened abruptly onto a wide, flat ledge that jutted from the mountainside like a great stone stage. He reached it just as the sun crested the distant horizon, flooding the sky with a breathtaking wash of gold and rose, painting the world below in a soft, hopeful light. Standing at the very edge of the stone stage, Gandalf faced the immense, sleeping form of the mountain. He closed his eyes, loosened the cord of his leather pouch, and let the crystallized dewdrop roll into his open palm. The first rays of the new sun struck it, and for a moment it blazed with the colors of the dawn itself. He did not sing aloud, for the ears of this ancient being were not made for sound. Instead, he drew a slow breath and opened his heart, projecting the pure, lost melody directly from his spirit into the stone beneath his feet and the vast, dreaming consciousness all around him. It was an offering of pure harmony, sent out like a gentle wave into an ocean of sorrow. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The deep, subaudible rumble of unease continued to vibrate through his boots. The cold lights in the distant fissures flickered with the same chaotic rhythm. A cold dread touched his heart. Had his offering been too small, the song too delicate to reach a mind so vast and troubled? Was it like whispering a lullaby into a thunderstorm? He refused to let the doubt take root. Instead, he poured more of his own essence into the projection, not with force, but with a profound and sincere generosity. He filled the melody with his own hope for this valley, his own peace from the silent woods, and his deep reverence for the slumbering giant. It was a gift given freely, with no demand for acknowledgement or response. Then the change began. The frantic, cold flickering of the mountain lights softened, their chaotic stutter slowing into a gentle, rhythmic pulse, like the steady breathing of a creature finally finding rest. The deep rumbling in the stone did not cease, but its tone shifted, the sharp edge of sorrow smoothing into a profound, resonant calm that felt less like silence and more like a deep and contented sigh. The melody was being accepted, woven like a golden thread into the fabric of the mountain's troubled dreams. As this new piece settled over the stone, a miracle bloomed at his feet. From a narrow crack in the unyielding rock, a single, perfect flower pushed its way into the light. Its petals were the exact soft blue of the dawn sky, a fragile, living testament to the harmony that had just been restored. Gandalf knelt, his robes pooling around him on the cool stone. His fingers, weathered by age and journey, reached out and gently brushed the delicate blue petals of the flower. It was a species he had never before encountered in all his long travels, its form a perfect, silent bell. And there, deep within its heart, he saw it, a tiny, captured spark of the very starlight melody he had offered. This was not a mere plant. It was the mountain's answer, a living word of gratitude woven from stone and song. The deep, resonant calm that now hummed through the rock was a final, undeniable confirmation. The healing had begun, its peace flowing down the slopes like a gentle rain, ensuring the safety of Stillwater and all who dwelled in the valley's embrace. His task here was beautifully, completely finished. A profound contentment settled in his heart, but it was a contentment that knew it could not linger. This single flower, this single valley, was a sanctuary, but the song he carried was a gift for all of Middle-earth. Its harmony was meant for every troubled heart, every forgotten corner, every place where the world's music had grown faint. To keep it here would be a different kind of loss, a hoarding of light in a world that still held so much shadow. The very purity that had soothed the mountain would now draw other kinds of attention as he traveled. It would call to the broken and the seeking, a beacon of hope. Yet that same gentle power might also lure darker wills, those who saw not a gift to be shared, but a power to be claimed and twisted to command. His decision was as quiet as the dawn. He would not pick the flower. His hand withdrew, leaving the blossom untouched upon its stony cradle. It would remain here, a permanent marker of the peace forged between the slumbering giant and the village below, a symbol for future generations that even the greatest strength can be comforted by the smallest note of grace. With a final, respectful nod to the vast, peaceful presence of the mountain, Gandalf turned. The fox family was already waiting. Their russet forms a warm contrast to the gray stone, and they began to lead the way down the now serene path, the descent feeling less like a leaving and more like the next step in a melody that was only just beginning to unfold. The air in Stillwater felt different, lighter, as if the entire valley had taken a deep, cleansing breath. Gandalf walked back into the village not as a stranger, but as a part of its newly restored rhythm. The villagers were already about their morning chores, their movements unhurried, and their chatter carrying a note of cheer they themselves did not seem to understand. They felt the change in their bones, a quiet joy they accepted as a gift from a good morning, never knowing it had been a gift from a quiet dawn on the mountain. Alara was waiting for him at the village gate, a small bundle of provisions in her hands. Her eyes, old and deep as still water, met his, and a look of profound understanding passed between them. No words were needed. She pressed the bundle into his hands, her touch a blessing. Then, a small group of younger villagers gathered, their faces alight with a new kind of hope. One, a sturdy young man with earnest eyes, stepped forward. "You have brought peace to our home," he said. "Stay with us. Be our protector." The request hung in the air, a tangible offer of a hearth and a purpose. Gandalf felt the weight of the plea, the simple comfort it promised, but he looked at their hopeful faces and knew he could not accept. "My duty is not to a single village," he explained, his voice gentle but firm, but to the wider song of the world itself. "I am a wanderer, a storyteller. To stay here, to build walls around this one light, would be to forget that the same shadow that touched your mountain falls on countless other places. True hope cannot be guarded, only shared. By refusing their offer, he was leaving them without the direct shield of his power. They would have only the lingering peace of the mountain and their own courage. Yet in that refusal, he honored the true nature of the song he carried, a power that diminished when hoarded and grew only when given freely. As he turned to leave, his gaze fell upon the village's edge. The russet fox and her kits were there, sitting calmly in a patch of sunlight. They made no move to follow him. Instead, they watched the village, their postures relaxed but alert, as if they had accepted a new, silent guardianship over this peaceful hollow. Their presence was a quiet promise that the valley was not entirely alone. The midday sun beat down on a dusty crossroads, its light bleaching the world into shades of gold and gray. Before Gandalf stretched two diverging paths. One, broad and well-trodden, curved toward the distant, proud spires of Minas Tirith, a city teeming with thousands of lives, politics, and the clamor of a great civilization. The other path was little more than a deer track, winding away into the wild, lonely hills where villages were few, and the old ways were slowly being forgotten. Here was the crux of his entire quest, laid bare in the dirt. Where does a song of pure harmony do the most good? Should he bring it to the multitudes in the great city, where its melody might inspire kings and armies, but just as easily be twisted into a tool for power, a banner for one faction over another? Or should he carry it into the quiet, fading places, where the need was perhaps more desperate, a single cup of water for a parched land, even if only a handful of souls remained to hear it? He thought of Minas Tirith, a place of stone and strategy, where wonder was often the first casualty of governance. The song could become a prisoner there, a state secret, its purity debated in council chambers until its magic was stripped away by words. Yet the wild places presented their own stark risk. What if he journeyed for weeks only to find empty hearths and abandoned fields, his offering falling on ears that had long since ceased to listen, the melody echoing in a void with no one to carry it forward? The weight of the leather pouch against his chest was his only counsel. He closed his eyes, and the memory of the blue flower on the mountainside surfaced in his mind, a small, perfect miracle unseen by any but him and the sky. That was the true nature of this magic. It was not for grand pronouncements or the winning of wars. It was for the quiet mending of a single broken thing, the restoration of a harmony so subtle that its work was often done in secret. True power resided in these small, unexpected moments, in the forgotten corners where hope was a flicker, not a flame. His decision was clear. With a final glance toward the gleaming white city on the horizon, Gandalf the Grey turned his staff onto the narrow, winding path, committing himself to the solitude of the wild. The stakes of this choice were immense. His actions would now go unrecorded by chroniclers, his triumphs unwitnessed by crowds. The impact of the song would be measured not in the roaring approval of masses, but in the slow greening of a barren field, the return of a lost bird's call, the gentle sigh of a spirit unburdened. It was a quieter, deeper magic, and it demanded a quieter, deeper journey. The wild path soon opened into a vast, sun-drenched grassland, where the wind sang its own ancient tune through countless tall, golden stalks. The golden sea of grass stretched out in a great, whispering expanse under the vast sky. It was in this immense openness that Gandalf saw a small, solitary figure, a boy no older than 10, hunched over a staff as he watched over a handful of scraggly sheep. His shoulders were slumped with a despair that seemed too heavy for one so young. Approaching quietly, the wizard saw the tears tracing clean paths through the dust on the boy's cheeks. "My best you," the boy explained, his voice thick with grief. "She wandered off 2 nights ago. The wolves or the ravines, I fear she is gone for good." As the boy spoke of his loss, a simple and profound sorrow laid bare, Gandalf felt a distinct warmth bloom against his chest. The crystallized dewdrop in its leather pouch was responding, not to a world-shaking discord, but to this one honest heartache. For a fleeting moment, the old thought arose. Was this the purpose of a song that could calm a mountain, to find a single lost sheep? The scale felt almost laughable. But the warmth against his skin was an undeniable answer, a gentle correction. No trouble of the heart was too small for compassion. Indeed, this was the very soil where such a song was meant to grow. He did not raise his staff or chant a spell. Instead, he lowered himself to the ground, sitting beside the boy in the dust and the grass. He began to speak, his voice a low, steady rhythm like a heartbeat. He told a story of a young star that once fell from the sky, frightened and lost in a dark wood. It forgot its own light, believing itself to be just a cold, gray stone. But the wind, which remembered every song, refused to let it be forgotten. It whispered the star's own name back to it, a single, clear note carried on the breeze, until the star remembered its nature and began to glow once more, finding its way home by its own rekindled light. As Gandalf spoke, he wove the faintest, most delicate threads of the lost melody into the tale itself. It was not a command sent across the plains, but a suggestion, a gentle nudge of hope released into the world's currents. The boy, who had been listening with a desperate intensity, felt the cold knot of fear in his own chest begin to loosen, replaced by a fragile, blooming warmth. He sat up straighter, his eyes scanning the horizon with a new, quiet certainty. And far away, across rolling hills and hidden gullies, the lost ewe, weary and confused, lifted her head. The air around her seemed to shift, carrying not a sound she could hear, but a feeling she could feel, a deep, instinctual pull as familiar as the boy's call. It was a feeling of safety, of a warm fold and a full trough. Turning from the thicket that had trapped her, she began to trot, then to run, her hooves beating a steady rhythm toward home. The boy's sudden, joyous shout tore through the quiet afternoon. There she is. He was on his feet, pointing at a distant speck growing larger, his face transformed by a radiant, disbelieving smile. That shout, that pure, unfiltered cry of relief and happiness, was its own kind of perfect music, a new note added to the world's great symphony. Gandalf rose, a quiet smile touching his own lips. His spirit felt inexplicably lighter, as if he had not given something away, but had instead received a gift. He left the boy running to meet his returning sheep and continued on his path. The memory of that joyful sound a gentle echo in the vast, whispering plains. The path followed the lazy curve of a slow-moving river, its waters thick and brown, moving with the weary reluctance of a burdened heart. And there, on its bank, stood the source of the languor, a willow tree of such immense age and sorrow that the air itself felt heavy with tears. Its branches did not merely hang, but poured downward in a cascade of living grief, their tips trailing in the murky water, as if trying to wash away a pain that would not fade. A palpable aura of loss radiated from its gnarled trunk, a silent lament that made the very light seem dimmer. A kingfisher, its usual brilliant blue muted by the gloom, alighted on a nearby rock and chittered a quick, sad story to the listening wizard. It spoke of a great oak that had once stood as the willow's twin, a companion for centuries, until a storm's fury had sent a spear of lightning to shatter it to splinters. The willow had been weeping ever since, its sorrow so profound it was choking the life from the river and causing the flowers on the bank to bow their heads and wilt. Gandalf approached the grieving giant, his steps slow and respectful. He knew that to dismiss such a love, to try and simply erase the memory, would be a violence greater than the initial loss. This was not a discord to be corrected, but a wound that needed honoring. He placed his hands flat upon the rough, damp bark of the trunk, closed his eyes, and did not offer a cheerful tune or a spell of forgetting. Instead, he opened his heart and shared the lost melody in its most gentle form, not as a replacement for what was gone, but as a testament to what had been. He wove the harmony into a balm, a musical reminder that the love shared with the oak was not lost, but had become a part of the willow's very fiber, an eternal echo in the deep roots they had once shared. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the offering had failed. The willow's hanging branches began to tremble violently, and a wave of pure, undiluted despair washed over Gandalf, so potent it threatened to pull his own spirit down into a bottomless well of sorrow. The grief intensified, a final, defiant storm against the comfort being offered. The wizard held fast, his own heart aching with the tree's immense pain, but he did not withdraw the song. He simply stood as a witness, allowing the melody to persist, a quiet, steady light in the overwhelming darkness. Then the tension broke. The violent trembling softened into a gentle shiver, and a single, fresh, green shoot pushed its way from a scarred cleft in the ancient trunk. It was a vibrant, living declaration that life could persist alongside grief. At that very moment, the river seemed to shake itself awake, its waters clearing and beginning to bubble with their old, cheerful music once more, carrying the renewed song of the land downstream. Further down the river, the air grew thick with a different kind of weight. It was not the profound grief of the Willow, but a fog of mundane despair. An old fisherman stood hip deep in the water, his shoulders slumped as he wrestled with his net. It was not snarled in weeds or branches, but in a snarl of lost, sad thoughts that had somehow become tangible, a gray, ethereal substance that clung to the ropes like sticky cobwebs. The more he pulled, the heavier and more tangled the net became, and with each fruitless tug, a little more light seemed to fade from his eyes. Gandalf watched as the man's own frustration fed the magical malaise, creating a cycle of deepening despondency. A swift slash of a magical blade might cut the net free, but Gandalf understood this was no simple knot. This was accumulated sorrow given form. To sever it with force would not destroy the negativity, but merely scatter it back into the world, perhaps to settle on another troubled soul downstream. The true solution was not in cutting, but in unweaving. Saying nothing, the wizard set his staff on the bank and waded into the cool water. He did not reach for the net with a spell, but with his bare hands. His fingers, though old, were clever and patient. He began the slow, meticulous work of untangling the knots, not with haste or frustration, but with a gentle, unwavering focus. As his fingers worked, he began to hum, not the full, overwhelming force of the Starlight melody, but a small, quiet fragment of it, a simple tune of order and peace. He poured this simple harmony into the very act of untangling, meeting the negative energy not with opposition, but with a calm, persistent clarity. The effect was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. The gray, sticky substance, clinging to the net, began to loosen its grip. As Gandalf's patient fingers and soft hum continued their work, the despair began to dissolve, turning from a solid tangle into a silvery mist that lifted from the ropes. The mist rose in delicate tendrils, catching the sunlight for a beautiful moment before vanishing completely, as if the sorrow itself was being gently remembered and then released. With the last knot freed, the net fell loose and clean in the fisherman's hands. He looked at it, then at Gandalf, the weary haze gone from his face, replaced by a look of quiet wonder. The weight on his spirit had lifted with the mist. In gratitude, the old man gestured to his small, sturdy boat, pulled up on the shore. "The current is steady, and the way is smooth," he said. "Your feet have earned their rest." Gandalf accepted with a nod, the prospect of floating on the river's gentle current a quiet mercy after the labors of the heart. The gentle lapping of the water against the wooden hull was a lullaby, a rhythm of pure peace. The old fisherman whistled a simple, tuneless melody as he guided the small boat, and the two sounds wove together into a quiet symphony that cradled the wizard. For the first time in what felt like an age, Gandalf allowed his shoulders to relax, his hands resting on his knees as the world drifted past. In this blessed stillness, the crystallized song within his pouch did not sleep. It seemed to breathe with him, its subtle vibrations syncing with the beat of his own heart, the flow of his own spirit. The melody was no longer just a treasure he carried, but was slowly becoming a part of the very air in his lungs, a light that shone from within his own bones. He was not merely a guardian of the song, he was becoming its living vessel. Yet this deep harmony also brought a sharp clarity. He knew such perfect peace was a rare gift on a road fraught with shadows. There would be more tests, more places where the song's gentle power would be seen as a threat or a prize. To face what was to come, he could not afford to be softened by the calm. He closed his eyes not to sleep, but to meditate, to fortify his will. He reaffirmed the quiet vow he had made at the mountain, to be a bearer of this light, a storyteller of its grace. He would share it, never command with it. This internal resolve settled over him like a second cloak, a layer of spiritual steel beneath his gray robes. This fortification came not a moment too soon. As the little boat rounded a wide, sandy bend in the river, the air grew suddenly cool. The cheerful, sun-drenched banks fell away, replaced by a wall of dark, twisted trees that seemed to drink the very light from the sky. This was the outer edge of Mirkwood, a forest whose name was spoken in whispers, a tangled realm where the paths were said to forget themselves. Thanking the fisherman with a quiet nod, Gandalf stepped from the boat onto the soft, loamy bank. His staff, which had glowed with a soft, comforting light on the river, now brightened instinctively, its white radiance pushing back against the oppressive gloom that waited just beyond the first line of gnarled oaks. The air at the edge of Mirkwood was a cold, thick syrup that clung to his skin and clothes. Gandalf knew the legends of the forest's treacherous shortcuts, paths that could save a traveler weeks of journey, but demanded a toll on the spirit. Against his chest, the leather pouch pulsed with a soft, rhythmic thrum, no longer a gentle warmth, but a clear, insistent warning. The forest's own magic was a snarled, thorny thing, a discordant energy that recoiled from the pure harmony he carried. To enter was to risk the song being twisted by the shadows, its clear notes turned sour and dissonant. Yet to go around would mean weeks of delay, and he felt in his bones that the world did not have weeks to spare. Taking a steadying breath, Gandalf chose to trust in the song's own resilient light. He would enter, but as a guest, not a conqueror, using his staff's glow as a humble lantern, never a blazing challenge to the dark. The moment he passed beneath the gnarled canopy, the world changed. The bright midday sun was extinguished, replaced by a perpetual, green-tinged twilight. The forest floor fell into an unnerving silence, and into that silence poured the whispers. They were not words he could understand, but voices all the same, slithering through the still air just at the edge of his hearing, neither welcoming nor threatening, but endlessly, patiently curious. He found a narrow, almost invisible path, worn by unknown feet, and began to follow it. The whispers coiled around him like a cold mist, brushing against his mind with questions that had no sound, testing the strength of his purpose with every cautious step he took. The path through Mirkwood was a slow, winding test of will, the whispers a constant, draining pressure against his mind. After what felt like a full day of this relentless journey, the oppressive trees simply parted, revealing a small, circular clearing bathed in a soft, silver light. The air here was clear and sweet, free of the clinging gloom, and at its very center grew a single, flawless white flower. its petals seeming to glow with their own inner luminescence. This was the Heart Glade, an oasis of profound peace. The moment he stepped inside, the forest's whispers ceased completely, replaced by a deep, resonant silence that felt not like an emptiness, but like a held breath of reverence. The magic here was ancient and gentle, a clear, familiar cousin to the starlight melody he carried. It was a sanctuary woven from the same fundamental harmony. He lowered himself to the soft moss, the tension of the journey seeping from his bones as he rested his staff beside him. The desire to remain was a physical pull, a seductive whisper of its own. Here, he and the song would be safe, insulated from the forest's corruption and the world's endless demands. He could simply stay and let the greater journey fade into a forgotten dream. This was the Glade's true test, a trap woven not from thorns, but from comfort. To remain would be to hoard the light, to build a wall around a single candle, while the rest of the world shivered in the dark. The song was not a treasure to be buried, but a seed that needed to be scattered. With a resolve that cost him dearly, Gandalf pushed himself to his feet. He felt refreshed, his spirit cleansed by the Glade's pure magic, but he turned his back on its safety. The stakes of his quest were crystal clear. His duty was not to his own peace, but to those trapped in the deeper darkness, beyond this small circle of light. He had to willingly return to the trials, to carry this comfort into the places that needed it most. As he stepped across the threshold, the cool, clear air of the Glade vanished, replaced once more by Mirkwood's heavy, watchful gloom. The forest seemed to regard him with a renewed, almost predatory interest. Before him, the path did not continue in one direction, but split neatly into two identical, shadowy tunnels, each one a dark and waiting mouth. Two paths lay before him, each a tunnel of identical, tangled gloom. Gandalf did not study the ground for tracks or peer into the darkness for a sign. Instead, he closed his eyes, shutting out the forest's deceptive stillness. He turned his focus inward, listening past the beat of his own heart, reaching for the quiet hum of the crystallized song resting against his chest. He asked a silent question, not which path was safer, but which one still held a thread of hope. The answer came not as a sound, but as a gentle, magnetic pull, a leaning of his entire spirit toward the left-hand fork. In that same moment, a distinct warmth bloomed through the leather of his pouch. A soft, silvery light spilled from its opening, a liquid radiance that pooled on the forest floor and flowed forward, illuminating the left-hand path just enough to reveal its truth. The light did not blaze, but simply existed, a quiet affirmation in the face of overwhelming doubt. In stark response, the right-hand path seemed to drink the surrounding shadows, becoming a wall of absolute blackness. From that darkness seeped a wave of cold, sharp disappointment, so potent it felt like a physical slap. It was not a natural feeling, but an emotion projected by something that had been waiting, something that had expected him to choose wrong and now felt cheated of its prize. Gandalf opened his eyes and looked directly into the oppressive blackness of the rejected path. He did not raise his staff in challenge or utter a spell of banishment. He simply gave a slow, knowing nod, an acknowledgement of the presence that lurked there. He would not feed it with his fear or his anger. Then, with a firm and final step, he moved onto the left-hand path. The silvery light from the pouch faded, its work done, but the glow from his staff strengthened. pushing back the shadows ahead with a calm, unwavering authority. His refusal to engage in conflict was itself a weapon. The forest shadows thrived on struggle, on the frantic energy of fear and confrontation. By choosing hope with a quiet heart, he gave them nothing to consume, and their grip on his spirit weakened instantly. The very air felt lighter. The path under his feet began to slope gently upward, no longer winding aimlessly, but with a clear purpose. Then it came, the first true breath of clean air he had drawn in what felt like an age, a fresh, cool breeze that carried the distant, promising scent of open country. The far edge of Mirkwood was near. The sudden shock of sunlight was a physical warmth on his face, a blessing after the endless twilight of the woods. He stood at the edge of the Anduin Valley, the great river, a silver ribbon in the distance, and felt the suffocating weight of Mirkwood simply slide from his shoulders. With every deep breath of clean, unfiltered air, the crystallized song against his chest seemed to pulse with a brighter, clearer light, as if it too was rejoicing in this return to open sky and flowing water. Yet the sheer vastness of the lands that stretched before him was its own kind of weight. Rolling hills rose and fell like a frozen green sea, leading to distant, hazy mountains. Where in all this immensity was he to go next? The song's ultimate destination remained a mystery, and the weariness of his long journey settled deep into his bones. He needed more than a moment's respite. He needed to truly rest. Finding a soft, grassy bank overlooking the river, he gathered dry twigs and built a small, cheerful fire. Its crackling flames were a friendly, familiar music, a humble counterpoint to the grand symphony he carried. This was not a retreat, but an act of profound trust. He was allowing the world to guide him, trusting that the song itself, with its own gentle will, would seek out the place it was most needed. As the last light of day faded from the sky, he lay back, the fire's warmth a comfort, and let sleep pull him under. And in that space between waking and dreaming, the melody stirred, no longer a mere hum in his spirit, but a vivid vision. He saw a high, lonely peak, its summit a stark finger of rock, reaching for a sky dense with unfamiliar, brilliant stars. The stars were not distant points of light, but brilliant, humming fires he could almost reach out and hold. In his dream, Gandalf climbed a peak of pure, crystalline stone that sang with every step he took, the path itself a ladder of solidified music. The air was thin and sharp, tasting of frost and infinity. At the summit, a figure waited, woven from the very starlight that bathed the peak. It had no face, no form he could name, yet its presence was a deep and familiar comfort, like hearing a voice from a childhood long forgotten. This was a memory of the original singer, a starlight spirit who had first woven the lost melody from the chaos of creation. Its confirmation was a wave of pure understanding that washed over him. Your purpose is nearly complete, the spirit communicated without words. You have carried the song with grace, mending what was broken in its quiet name. But the song was never meant to be carried forever. It is a living breath, and all breath must be released to give life. To renew its magic for the world, it must be sung back into the heavens from this very peak. A quiet conflict stirred within Gandalf. The leather pouch had become a part of him, the melody a constant companion and a source of strength. The thought of opening his hand and letting it rise away felt like a physical loss, a severance. He had fought shadows and soothed giants to protect it. To simply let it go felt like a surrender of all that effort. Yet the spirit's logic was as pure and undeniable as the starlight. The song was a gift, not a possession. Its true power was not in being kept safe, but in being set free to weave itself back into the fabric of the world, to strengthen the foundations of things and whisper anew in the dreams of all living beings. His stewardship was not about holding on, but about knowing the precise moment to release. In the dream, he made his choice. He drew the leather pouch from his neck, and the crystallized dewdrop floated into his open palm, glowing with the light of a captured star. He did not clutch it. He offered it back to the starlight spirit, his hand open and uplifted. A pang of loss, sharp and human, pierced him, but it was instantly washed away by a wave of profound rightness, a feeling of a circle closing with perfect symmetry. This was the final test, and he had passed. He had to trust that the song, set loose, would do infinitely more good than it ever could contained within his solitary keeping. The spirit accepted the offering, and the dewdrop dissolved into 1,000 threads of light that spiraled upward, joining the constellations in a silent, glorious symphony. He woke with the first hint of dawn, the dream's clarity etched into his mind like a map. The fire was cold ash, and the world was still hushed. There was no question, no hesitation. He knew, with an absolute certainty that settled deep in his bones, that his journey was not over. He had to find the real-world counterpart of the star peak from his vision. His path was now a straight line drawn by starlight. Gandalf consulted the deep maps of his memory, ancient charts of lore held not on parchment, but in the spirit, and the peak from his dream resolved into a name, a place, a truth. It was the Mindolluin, the great mountain that stood as a silent, eternal sentinel behind the city of Minas Tirith. The irony was not lost on him. He had deliberately turned from the city's broad road, choosing the wild paths, only to have his journey curve back and point him directly toward the heart of human power. Yet his purpose felt entirely new. He was not heading there to counsel stewards or influence armies. He was a pilgrim, approaching a sacred altar, his goal fixed on the summit, not the city streets below. Reaching that peak, however, was a challenge in itself. Mindolluin was not a common hill to be climbed by any wanderer. It was a hallowed place, its heights guarded by ancient tradition and a watchfulness that went beyond mere soldiers. He would need to seek permission to present his cause not as a wizard's demand, but as a humble request. Setting off with a vigor that belied his years, his stride was no longer that of a wanderer, but of a man with a divine appointment, every footfall filled with a focused and reverent intent. This was the final, critical leg of his long journey. Success would mean releasing the song to renew the world's foundational magic, letting its harmony strengthen every living thing. Failure, however, would mean the melody fading back into the oblivion from which he had so carefully rescued it, its light extinguished for ages to come. As he crested a final rise, the white city appeared in the distance, its 7 tiers and proud towers gleaming like a fallen moon against the dark bulk of the mountain, a beacon guiding him to the base of his destiny. The blessing of the stewards felt like a fragile parchment in his mind, a formal permission that meant nothing to the mountain itself. The path up Mindolluin was a brutal test of stone and will, a narrow ribbon of switchbacks carved into the sheer face, each turn revealing only more rock and sky. His muscles burned with a fire he had not felt in an age, and his breath came in ragged clouds in the thin, frigid air. With every laboring step, the world below transformed, the white city shrinking to a child's toy, the fields and rivers becoming a mere quilt of green and silver, stitched together by distant sunlight. From this impossible height, his entire journey, from the silent woods to the weeping willow, seemed to condense into a single, fragile thread of purpose. The mountain's own presence was a constant, silent pressure against his spirit. This was no mere physical climb. Mindolluin was a hallowed place, and it demanded a purity of intent from any who sought its summit. It tested not his strength, but his heart, probing for any trace of pride, any lingering desire to claim the song as his own triumph. The mystical weight was a heavier burden than the thin air, a force that threatened to press him back down the slope if his focus wavered for even a moment. He dared not look up at the distant peak, nor down at the dizzying drop. His world narrowed to the next step, the next secure handhold in the cold rock. He leaned into the rhythm of his own movement, and with each placement of his staff, he felt the quiet hum of the melody resonate through his weary bones, a gentle fuel for his determination. He was so close now, the culmination of every sacrifice, every quiet act of compassion, was contained within the leather pouch, beating in time with his heart. The stakes of this final ascent were absolute. A single misstep, a single moment of doubt or arrogance, would not merely mean a fall. It would mean the song shattered on the rocks below, its light extinguished forever, all his efforts unraveled in an instant. This knowledge was a sharp clarity that honed his every sense, making his grip sure and his footsteps deliberate. Then, with a final, grinding effort that pulled at every muscle, he hauled his body over a last, jagged ledge. He stood on a small, flat expanse of stone, the wind a clean, constant roar in his ears. The world was spread out in a breathtaking panorama beneath the endless vault of the sky, and he had reached the threshold of the heavens. The wind on the summit, it was a clean, constant roar, a river of air washing away the last vestiges of the climb. Gandalf stood at the very apex of the world, the leather pouch a familiar weight against his heart. With fingers that trembled not from cold but from reverence, he loosened the cord and let the pouch fall open. The crystallized dewdrop drifted into his waiting palm, and the moment it touched the air of that sacred place, it erupted with a light that was both brilliant and deeply gentle. It pulsed with a joyful, knowing warmth, recognizing its original home in the sea of stars above. This was not an ending, but a homecoming. He did not chant or summon his will. He simply opened his hand and lifted his arm, offering the song back to the sky from which it was born. The dewdrop floated upward from his palm, a tiny, ascending star. But then it stopped. It hung motionless in the air, a single, gleaming point against the vast darkness. A cold dread seized Gandalf's heart. Had he failed? Had the long journey somehow tainted the melody, making it unworthy of the heavens? Was the connection, so vivid in his dream, now broken? In that terrifying silence, he did not reach for magic. He reached for memory. He poured every quiet triumph into that hovering light. The fox's trusting blink, the shepherd boy's radiant smile, the willow's first green shoot of renewal, the mountain's deep, contented sigh. He sent all of it upward in a final, silent prayer, a surrender not of defeat, but of perfect trust. He let it all go, and in that ultimate release, the crystallized dewdrop answered. It did not fall. It shattered without a sound, exploding into a million motes of living starlight. They swirled in a silent, glorious dance, each spark a carrier of the lost melody, and then they scattered, flying to every corner of the firmament. Across all of Middle-earth, from the deepest forest to the highest hall, no one heard a sound, yet every living thing, for a single, breathless moment, felt it. A wave of profound and inexplicable peace washed over the world, a gentle warmth in the spirit, a quiet sense that something long out of tune had at last slipped back into harmony. As the new starlight settled into its eternal patterns, a gentle warmth touched Gandalf's shoulder. He turned, and there she stood, the starlight spirit from his dream, her form woven from the very constellations now renewed. She said no word, but her smile was a universe of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement that his long work was finally, perfectly done. Her touch was not a weight, but a warmth that spread from his shoulder to the very core of his being. In that profound silence, a universe of gratitude poured into him, a river of cosmic recognition that washed away the last traces of his weariness and filled the hollows of his spirit with a light that felt both ancient and entirely new. He understood, not as a thought, but as a fundamental truth written into his bones, that his true purpose had never been to own the melody, but to serve as its guide, a humble shepherd for a star. In that singular act of selfless release, he had not lost the song. He had woven the story of his own journey, from the silent woods to this very peak, into its eternal fabric, becoming a permanent note within its endless harmony. This understanding was the greatest reward he could ever receive. The spirit's form began to soften at its edges, its light gently unraveling like mist in a morning sun. A quiet sorrow touched Gandalf's heart, the natural grief that comes with any beautiful ending, but it was a clean feeling, without bitterness or regret. He watched the luminous being fade, and he accepted this parting with a profound and peaceful grace, knowing that the most powerful magic is often transient, its true value measured not in its duration, but in the change it leaves behind in its wake. He was alone again on the vast, wind-swept peak, but the man standing there was not the same one who had climbed it. The weight of the quest was gone, replaced by a deep, unshakable wisdom and a quiet joy that would now color his every word and deed. He felt no new power thrumming in his hands, only a clearer sight in his eyes and a more patient rhythm in his heart. He looked up at the stars, now shining with a renewed and vibrant light, and knew it was time to go home. The descent from the star-kissed peak felt like walking on air, the heavy weight of his quest replaced by a profound and lasting lightness. He did not turn toward the gleaming white city below, its politics and clamor now feeling like a distant dream. Instead, Gandalf the Grey pointed his staff toward the open road, the familiar dust already gathering on his boots. He was a wanderer once more, but the man who walked now was fundamentally changed. The memory of the song was not a fading echo, but a constant, gentle warmth in his spirit, a quiet peace that seemed to radiate from him and soften the edges of the world around him. Shadows still clung to the corners of Middle-earth, and sorrow would always find its way into mortal hearts. He knew this with a clear-eyed certainty, but he now faced it with an unshakable knowledge. The great harmony of creation was not a fragile, single thread, but a living, breathing force, constantly being renewed in the silent spaces between the stars. This truth did not make him a warrior against the dark, but a gardener of the light. His mission was reaffirmed. He would remain a storyteller, a kindler of hope in forgotten places. He understood now that a simple act of kindness, a word of comfort offered to a troubled soul, could carry the faint, beautiful resonance of the starlight melody itself, its effect rippling outward in ways he might never see. His own great journey was complete, yet his work was truly without end. He had become a living bridge, connecting the vast, silent magic of the cosmos to the humble, everyday needs of the people he met on the road. As the path curved away from the mountain and into the welcoming embrace of the wild, rolling hills, a new tune found its way to his lips. It was not the ancient melody of the stars, but a song of his own making, a gentle whistle woven from the memory of a russet fox's trust, a shepherd boy's joy, and a willow tree's renewal. It was a humble melody for a humble road, and he whistled it softly into the breeze, a promise to keep walking and listening for as long as the journey lasted. The dewdrop did not simply rise. It hung suspended between his hand and the heavens, a single point of captured starlight, hesitating in the vast dark. For a heart-stopping moment, Gandalf feared he had failed, that the journey had somehow left a taint upon the song, rendering it unworthy of its celestial home. But in that silence, he did not reach for a spell or a command. He reached for the deepest truth of his long road. He poured into that hovering light the memory of the fox's trusting blink, the shepherd boy's radiant smile, the willow's first green shoot of renewal, and the mountain's deep, contented sigh. He offered it all, every quiet triumph, in a final, silent prayer of perfect trust, opening his own heart and releasing his claim on the melody forever. And in that ultimate act of selfless surrender, the crystal answered. It did not fall. It shattered without a sound, exploding into a million motes of living light that swirled in a silent, glorious dance before scattering to every corner of the firmament. No ear in Middle-earth heard a note, yet from the deepest forest to the highest hall, every living thing felt it. A wave of profound and inexplicable peace washed over the world, a gentle warmth in the spirit, a quiet certainty that something long out of tune had at last slipped back into harmony. It was not the end of sorrow, but a reminder woven into the fabric of existence itself, a reaffirmation that the foundation of all things was, and would always be, goodness. His wanderings continued, but the road itself felt different under his feet, softer somehow, as if the earth now remembered the harmony he had helped restore. Gandalf carried no grand title and wielded no new staff of power. The change was far more subtle, a quiet light that had settled in his eyes and a patient rhythm in his step. He was a living vessel of the memory, and he shared it not in great proclamations, but in the gentle timbre of his voice and the calm certainty of his presence. A simple story told to a worried traveler, a quiet word of encouragement to a struggling farmer. These small acts now carried the faint, beautiful resonance of the starlight melody itself, rippling outward in ways he would never see. Back in the village of Stillwater, life found its own peaceful cadence. The russet fox and her growing kits were a common sight at the wood's edge, no longer mere observers but quiet guardians. The villagers, though they did not understand the magic, felt a lasting safety in their presence, a sense that the wild itself watched over them with benign eyes. High above, the mountain dreamed on, its slopes no longer flickering with cold anxiety, but humming with a deep, contented calm that ensured the valley's springs ran clear and its harvests were plentiful. And the shepherd boy, now a young man, would sometimes pause in his work, looking out across the plains with a quiet smile, forever holding inside him the certainty that hope could indeed call lost things home. The world was not perfected, for shadows still gathered in distant corners, and sorrow still visited mortal hearts. Yet its foundations had been strengthened, its essential music renewed. Gandalf walked its many paths with a profound contentment, not because he had defeated a great evil, but because he had faithfully played his part. He had been a humble guide, a temporary shepherd for a magic that was never his to own, a magic that belonged to the wind, the stone, and every listening heart. His greatest triumph was not in the keeping, but in the graceful letting go, and in the quiet understanding that his own story was now a permanent, harmonious note in the world's endless, unfolding song.